Welcome to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brad and John, they're the ones to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
It is the BJ Show, and we are back with our original intro. And John has everything in the world to do with that. Right, John?
I think our listeners do, Brad. Let's give some credit to our listeners.
Well, John, you're the conduit for the listeners. How's that? The listeners have spoken to John. They dare not talk to me because they know I'll just slap them down and not listen to them, because that's what we do with listeners. We just don't care about them. We just, they're just peeps.
And you don't ever give your number out on the air, Brad. How would people ever reach you?
314-280-8880. It's my cell phone number. Once again, I did that again the other day, and someone actually texted me and goes, "Is this your real cell phone number?" And I replied, "Yes." That's all it was. You know what? I've told this story before. On a daily basis, I go to various websites and look at different things and try to get clients and maybe do some stuff for myself, some companies I'm trying to do business with, stuff like that. Some companies make it so tough to get in touch with them. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
I do know. The subject of story number 3 would love to have a direct line to Speaker Mike Johnson, but it seems like he doesn't have that, Brad.
Okay, that is John Combest, Combest, every single day for the past, 23 years now? 23 plus? It was back in October was your anniversary, right?
Yeah, a little over 23, sure.
He puts together this extensive list of all the important stuff you should know about what's going on in the state of Missouri. It's various websites. Sometimes it's official websites. Sometimes it's some media.
It's never official websites. It's never press releases. It's never wacky stuff. But it is news stories, Brad. Thank you for that.
Well, don't you ever put anything like with
I've never linked to a government website.
Really?
For years. But thank you for the opportunity to clarify that.
No kidding. I didn't know that. Interesting. Anyway, John
I've never linked to. Go ahead.
John doesn't use any government websites. He uses private websites. And, you can't call public radio KWMU. That's not a private website. That's a public website.
That's true, Brad. That's true. That's ours.
Well, hold on a minute now. John, hold on a minute now. When you link to St. Louis Public Radio, you are linking to a government website.
That's a great point. Okay, I stand corrected there, Brad. You're right about that.
Because they may call themselves, listener supported. Once again, the people that work there get a check from the state of Missouri. They're in the Missouri State Pension Fund. They are government employees, right?
And how many are there at St. Louis Public Radio, Brad? It's been nearly 24 hours since you mentioned it.
How many news people?
Yeah, how many people are on staff at St. Louis Public Radio?
Well, I just counted the news people. I haven't gone.
And that's how many, Brad?
34 people.
34?
34 news people, which I do believe is probably, and you know what? Here's the interesting thing. You ask questions. God, you're going to get me sidetracked. You know who the worst people are at avoiding the media?
Who's the media people?
The media people. If you try to call like another radio station and say, "Hey, I want to clarify something," you said, "Well, you have to talk to our attorney." It's like, dude, you're a radio station. You said this on the air. Can't you just clarify what? No, I'm sorry. You have to talk to our attorney. Okay, whatever. Okay, but anyway.
Hold on, Brad. In their defense, the best place to have a conversation with radio people is on Facebook, where they can escalate it to face punching.
That's J.C. Corcoran. John's got to,
I'm doing my best to get you off track, Brad.
We need to put another page on the website. We already have the glossary up there of the terms that you hear used from time to time on the show. We need to have another page about almost like footnotes, reference. When Brad talks about J.C. Corcoran punching him, this is what this is referenced to, and maybe a screenshot of the Facebook post where he said he was gonna. He wanted. What was it? The sound he wanted to hear was his fist crushing my face. Wasn't that what it was? Something like that?
Yeah, you said something that referenced something auditory. And then he said, have you ever heard of whatever? And he said, have you ever heard the sound of a fist punching you in the face?
Yes, right. Nice guy. Anyway, John put together this great website with all sorts of different sources. How about if I put it that way?
I love that, yes.
And we start off the morning, I'm losing my voice. We start off the morning with this guy. He comes into the studio. We bring him back from Norway in a grave. We pull him out, and he comes up and he says,
"I'm Casey Kasem."
And once again, I had somebody say to me, "Is he really buried in Norway?" Yes, he's buried in Norway. And we start with this one right here.
In third place,
Brad, if you did have Speaker Mike Johnson's number, you'd be texting him about a whole bunch of things. This continuing resolution debate going on, you'd probably be offering your opinion on that. And then probably you would use the time that he's lending you his ear to give him a plea from Josh Hawley. You know, Josh Hawley is really, really mad at Speaker Mike Johnson. And I'll give you one guess why, Brad. I bet you can guess.
Why is that?
It is the funding for the Coldwater Creek, Weldon Spring, all the radioactive victims, Brad. The compensation fund was left out of this continuing resolution. Now you say, John, that's been the case. There have been plenty of fights here and there. You're right. This has been an ongoing thing. But according to Josh Hawley, in a tweet/X post that he created, Speaker Mike Johnson is, quote, he personally killed a bipartisan, bicameral expansion and spending cap RECA deal. It was him alone. Now, Brad, for his part, Speaker Mike Johnson's people told the D.C. publication The Hill, look, it wasn't just Speaker Johnson. There were other people in the room negotiating that said, look, we're not going to make RECA a part of this. But Josh Hawley says no. He says essentially the deal was done and Mike Johnson killed it. Brad, this seems like a never-ending battle. When will Josh Hawley, Eric Schmidt, others, and all the other people across the country, when will they have their voices heard by Mike Johnson? When will this ever get passed, Brad?
You know, John, I have an anecdote. Can I give a quick little anecdote on here?
Yeah, please do. We got plenty of time.
I ran into a friend of mine I've known for a long time. I ran into matter of fact, he was at an event I was at recently, and his girlfriend was there, and I've never met his girlfriend. He's been going with this woman for like 17 years. They lived together the whole bit. And I'd never met her before. And she comes up to me and she says, "Are you Brad Hildebrand?" I go, "Yes." She goes, "You don't know who I am, do you?" I know. She says, "I'm Gary Bowdy's girlfriend." So she says, "Somebody told me you went to Hazelwood High School." And I said, "Yes." And she said, "So did I." And she gave me the year of her graduation. It's 1971. And I said, "Have you been to enter your reunions?" And she says, "It's really, I swear to God, this is what she said. It's really sad because so many of our classmates have died of cancer who lived near Coldwater Creek." Now, once again, someone would say that's anecdotal, but remember, this whole thing came to light over McClure High School reunion. Remember this story?
I do know that story, but some people might not have heard it. Tell it, Brad.
Well, I can't remember what class it was, but this has probably been maybe 5 or 10 years ago. There was a woman who graduated from McClure High School, went to her class reunion. I think it was she graduated sometimes in the 60s or 70s. And she got talking to various people and talking about classmates of hers that were no longer there. They'd passed away. Several of them who were there who had weird cancer. I mean, bizarre cancer. I mean, the kind of cancer like 1 in 2 million people have this kind of cancer. Very specific cancer, which you don't just see all the place. And there's like 10 people in North County that have this exact same cancer. And she started documenting this, and she came up with a map, which I don't know how she did this, but somehow she did a lot of research where these people lived who had passed away from her graduating class, and almost all of them lived within less than a half mile of Coldwater Creek in North County. Because once again, the Ferguson-Florissant School District, in the old days, there wasn't McClure North, it was just McClure High School, and Coldwater Creek runs through that area. Matter of fact, it comes up from the airport, it essentially goes north under McDonald, and then it goes underneath 270, and then it winds its way through North County and through Florissant, through ultimately Spanish Lake, where you and I grew up, and goes in the Mississippi River. I actually think it jumps into the Missouri, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, the point being that there's all these people who died from this, and here we are 80 years later, and we can send money to all these countries around the world. We can spend money for transsexual research and all this kind of stuff, but we can't spend money to take care of a problem that was caused by our government back in the 40s. Isn't that shameful, John?
It's outrageous. And particularly, Brad, just like you said, when you juxtapose it with how much money we're dumping into Ukraine and how much money we're dumping all across the world, it's absurd that we can't pass this. And it makes me think, Brad, I was thinking this morning, you just wonder if there's not something personal about this. Like, our elected officials are human. Is there something that Mike Johnson has against the Missouri people or maybe the people in New Mexico that were part of the original deal? Like, it just doesn't seem logical if a spending cap objection, which I think is completely reasonable, If you say it's too expensive and then you negotiate a spending cap, it seems like if that was really the issue, then this should be able to get through. But to me, it screams like Johnson must have some sort of personal vendetta against the folks that are pushing this.
Well, and then once again, we talked about this yesterday, the idea of all these job positions that were posted on the day after the election by the Biden administration. All these DEI positions, some of them paying as much as $350,000 a year. Okay.
I saw that, Brad, and they're all six-figure jobs. Some of them up to that much money. You're right.
Right. Okay. Why can't you take that money? We don't need DEI people in all these different departments because look at what corporate America is doing. Corporate America is getting rid of DEI instead of spending all that money on these. And some of the ones like, I remember the one that $330,000 a year and you only have to be in the office 2 days a week. John, you know what? If I had a job like that, I would think I was dead because I died and went to heaven. You know what I'm saying? I would be looking
when
up.
In reality, you would just spend a little time in the car streaming Brad's Church of God, which you can find at godsquad.cloud.
Thank you, John.
You know who's gone to the great graveyard in the skies? Story subject number 2, Brad.
Up a notch to number 2.
To quote the legendary philosopher Judy Blume, we must give Roy a bust. We must give Roy a bust. That's right. The great Roy Blunt just got a bust yesterday, Brad. He has gone to the political, you could say, the political graveyard in the sky. He's no longer an elected official. He is a lobbyist. He does do government relations. But you know what? He is retired from official politics, and now he has a bust at the Missouri State Capitol. There was a big to-do in Jefferson City about it. Dean Plocker put the whole thing together. Roy Blunt had his family there. It was a beautiful event, Brad. I saw some of the pictures on social media. Now when folks go to the Capitol, and by the way, I haven't been – let's make this about me for a minute. I haven't stepped foot in the Capitol, Brad, since 2009, and I have no intention of doing it really for the rest of my life. But if for people who do like to go to the Capitol, like if you're a fourth grader, you might be able to see a bust of Roy Blunt next to Rush Limbaugh, next to some other great Missourians. So this is pretty cool, don't you think, Brad? A well-deserved honor?
No, I think this is terrible. And I've said this before. We talked about this yesterday with the naming of streets, that MEC and Nick Schroedier. Did I get that right or get it wrong again?
No, you got it wrong, but let's just make it a meme. Let's make it wrong. I'm past the point, Brad, with our radio relationship. I don't care about correcting you anymore. Let's just call him Schroedier.
Wow. We're like married now, huh, John?
Yeah, I think so. I've laid down arms. I'm going to let Brad be Brad. Yes, let's call him Nick Schroedier.
How about Nick Schroeder? We'll call him Nick Schroeder. How's that?
Yeah, okay. He's related to Ricky Schroeder from Silver Spring.
Right.
Go ahead.
Different Strokes. Wasn't that what he was in or whatever? Okay. Anyway, I'm against all this stuff because of the fact that, first off, we shouldn't be worshiping our elected officials. We should be praising and honoring the people, the men and women who have gone to war to protect our country, and also the police officers who've died in the line of duty. That's the bust that should be in the Capitol building. That's the names of the streets that should be, memorialized. That's the name of the interstates, which should have names on it like that. Not Donald Trump and not, Ronald Reagan. The people who died to protect our country. That's the people. And I think it's this crazy thing. Why do we have to, have, oh my God, Roy Blunt. Oh, we've got to bust him. He's such a wonderful guy. He made a ton of money. He had a cush job. He went to D.C., lived like a king, worked in the Senate building, got all sorts of, perks, didn't have to go outside for lunch, had his own gym, had his own office, had super duper health care. He's got health care and pension till the day he dies, and we're honoring him? I say the guy we should honor is some guy that slugged his way through those swamps in Vietnam, came back with Agent Orange, and died. That's the guy we should be honoring. I'm sorry. It just drives me nuts with this whole statue and bust thing. Do I sound like I'm opinionated on that, John?
No, you sound bitter. And for folks who want to hear why Brad will never retire, go to our show yesterday, December 18th, at the beginning of C Block. We talked about why Brad will never retire. Brad, you and I just happen to disagree on this. I think that it's great that there's in Southwest Missouri, there's some buildings named after Roy Blunt. There's some buildings. Look, I'm not some kind of Blunt partisan. I think he was a good elected official. But I think that I think we can name buildings after Dick Gephardt. I think we can name them after Bill Clay Sr. And I think that, to begrudge an elected official who spent a lot of time flying on a plane back and forth to D.C., I think to begrudge them, a naming right is a little petty, but I'm sure people disagree. It's not petty how much Francis Howell spent, Brad, in that story number one.
Well, John, I just want to make one final comment. I do believe there's certain things that should be named after people like that, and I'm really happy because of the fact that when I go to the Quickie Mart and the guy in front of me is ordering blunts, I was thinking to myself, "Oh, Roy, he's got his own smoking device. Oh my God, isn't that great? They named that thing after Roy." And
I know, and you know what? Sometimes if they don't get a blunt, they go get a Nick Swisher Sweet. Aren't they named after Nick Swisher, the state senator from out there, Brad? Isn't that his last name? Nick Swisher Sweet?
Let's call him Nick Swisher Sweet.
Let's call him Nick Swisher. That's a good one.
John,
that might make him sound a little swishy. You know what I mean? Like a little light in his loafers.
John, I'm going to give you a little fun here. You know why? You know what the problem with Nick is?
What's that?
He doesn't like me.
The number one.
Brad, Francis Howell School District got the worst possible grade they could get. And no, I don't mean for being lenient on token up in the carpool lane. I mean a state audit yesterday gave Francis Howell the lowest possible rating, which is a rating of poor. And apparently, Brad, in building the new Francis Howell North High School, the district overran by almost 100%. That's right. It's cost almost twice as much to build Francis Howell North High School as originally planned. Did you catch up on any of this yesterday, Brad?
That's been an ongoing debate, and a lot of people are upset about that. And I've heard all sorts of crazy different reasons for that. They claim that the original high school wasn't built up to code or something like that, and now they're having to... Because what they did was, they sort of did the same thing they did with Francis Howell, the original Francis Howell School down there on 94. They rebuilt it, they put in a new section, but they kept part of the old section. They put the whole thing together. I mean, that's essentially what they did at Francis Howell North. Yeah, it's a crazy story if you really want to go behind the scenes on the thing.
And in this Post-Dispatch piece by Monica Obradovic, she lays out the fact, one of the things that's kind of a juicy nugget in here, I guess the district had a recommendation for who they should use to do the planning. And the group doing the planning that got the contract is called Atlas Building Group. Now, apparently Atlas Building Group is tied to a former member of the board, I guess, or a member of, I have to look at this a little bit closer, a former employee of Francis Howell School District owned Atlas Building Group. And in other words, the school board said, hey, we've ranked all these guys, and Atlas doesn't have the best total score and who should be doing this. But district officials apparently gave the contract to Atlas Building Group, even though they weren't the best. And if you read the story, it appears as though Atlas Building Group is at least partially responsible for the cost overruns and poor planning that went into overspending on this stuff. And Brad, real quick, I know we're up against time here, but apparently there's a number of other things that aren't addressed in here, which is the school allegedly inflated some of its attendance numbers by a matter of thousands of hours. The amount of money that a district gets is based on school attendance and how many hours kids are in school. So what Fitzpatrick's audit calls out here is that Francis Howell essentially lied about their attendance numbers in order to get more state funding. There's also a cameo in here, Brad, by your friend Cindy Cristofanelli's son, Phil Cristofanelli, who had been calling for an audit of the district for a while. And also the parents group, Francis Howell Families, the Political Action Committee, had been calling for an audit for quite a while. Apparently, they smelled a little bit of monkey business going on in the district. So not good news for Francis Howell, Brad. And you will remember that just either earlier this week or maybe late last week, the superintendent announced that he is flying the coop and going to Kirkwood School District.
I was going to make that comment because I'm thinking to myself, is this just sheer coincidence, or is this let's get out of here let the embers die down, right? Kind of a deal like.
Yeah. Well, and I think what's overlooked in this piece is that the superintendent had signed super agent Scott Boras, who just negotiated a much better contract with the Pioneers. So, I mean, you can't begrudge him of that. He saw what happened with Soto and he was out of there.
John, once again, you need some kind of a chart to figure out what John just said, because some of the people go, "Who's he talking about?"
It's called the DSM of psychological disorders, Brad. And folks can follow along for you and me.
Is that what it is? Okay, we have to take a break. We'll be back. And I have to follow up on the Francis Howell thing because I have a question for you to see if you remember something. I don't want to put it out there right now. Because
all right, I'm ready.
It's the first in the B block. We'll talk about this because there's a story that I think is pertinent to this, but I just want to make sure that you remember it. Maybe I'm just making it up. Okay.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?